my unmute button. I have too many screens up. All right, so we do have that recording starting right now. So welcome everybody. Looks like we do have a lot of our people here already. So I'm going to start our poll. Um, Today's poll is a pretty simple question. What's your relationship with pillars? And some of you guys do have multiple relationships with pillars, so it is multiple choice. You can choose any that apply. All right, we're just getting a lot of answers in, but they're still coming in. Give it another second. It always makes me a little nervous when I launch the poll because since I launched it, I don't get to answer it. So I'm glad that you guys are because it makes me know that it's working. Um, Thank you to everybody who is introducing themselves in the chat. We got lots of familiar faces here as well and some new ones. So welcome if it's your first time joining us, and welcome back if we already have a great relationship with you. All right, looks like we got 93% participated in the poll. Anybody else last minute? Got it in. All right. So sharing the results of the poll, it looks like we have a really nice balance today. A couple staff members, one Pillars board member. I'm betting that's Pam. Hi, Pam. And a lot of people from community partner agencies, just general members of the community, volunteers and donors, in pretty much equal amounts. So welcome today. We're so glad you're part of this conversation. We do try to make it part of that community conversation. One of the things we recently did for conversations was ask the same question to anyone who'd attended our 2024 sessions. If you answered that poll, thank you very much. So during that, those results, we did have a few more representatives from our partner agencies. Ooh, I spelled that wrong. Didn't catch that typo till just now. Sorry about that. Answer than we did today. But a lot of community members as well, and then people who are strong supporters as volunteers, donors, a couple staff and board members as well answered the poll. So if you are one of those people, again, thank you for that. One of the things that we asked in the poll was what motivates you to join Conversations Over Coffee in a way to help guide the topics for the upcoming year. And it seems like it was pretty balanced between reasons why people join us. Sometimes people join us to learn about our pillars programs and services. 28% of the people answered that. So we are going to continue to offer programs like today where we do a deeper dive into some of our services. And then 31% just want to be part of discussions that impact our community. We do get lots of community members on these calls as well. So thank you for being here. We hope to continue to find topics that are relevant, not just to Pillars, but to our community as a whole, and to bring in those community partner agencies that we work with to help share those topics, be a part of that conversation as well, in various issues relating to homelessness and housing insecurity. For example, our next session in April, we already have set up. I think Megan Sherwood's on the call. She'll be one of the people presenting for us. We invited United Way in. They do a great presentation about the ALICE population. So if you're wondering what ALICE is and you can't wait until April, you should definitely go to the United Way website and check it out. Otherwise, you can wait till April, where we're going to be talking about that. Another thing that we got asked was how you liked our format, and most people really did like the level of engagement with our format. But a few did want, about 25% did ask for other opportunities to engage. So when we ask for ALICE, they are going to be doing a simulation, an ALICE simulation. Don't worry, it's not going to be too intense. My understanding is that you're going to be like reacting with emojis to different choices. So that's great. It'll be a little bit more interaction next time, but not too much. We're not going to raise the bar that much. So we do hope you'll join us for those as well. We also got a lot of great ideas for new topics to discuss. If you did not take the survey or you have an idea that you thought of after the survey, please email me at events@pillarsinc.org. It's a great list of topics I have to choose from now to work, like what you guys are interested in. But I'm always looking for more so that we choose the best and most relevant topics to keep this conversation going. Very important for Pillars to bring the community in and to have these conversations. The most important thing to come from this survey is we will be doing a slight schedule change starting in 2025. We are going to switch to quarterly conversations. So the first one is today, which some of you may have noticed is a week earlier than we normally do. Usually we do the first Thursday in February. We are going to be doing the last Thursday or the fourth Thursday of each quarter. So the next one will be April 24th, and then we'll meet again on July 31st and October 30th. So this should spread them out a little bit more, and we won't have that huge gap over Christmas when we're all busy. All right, so I see Paige is here. Have we seen Emily come, or I'm sorry, have we seen Liz come on the call yet? Yes, okay. Lovely. So, today's topic. So at Pillars, we envision a creative, compassionate community that collaborates to find innovative, effective solutions so experiences of homelessness are rare and brief, and everyone has a place to call home. If that sounded really polished, that's because it's our vision statement. I'm just reading it. But what if we didn't have to have an experience of homelessness? What if someone's situation, like their experience was so brief that their situation stabilized before they actually experienced homelessness? What a vision to have, what a vision to share. So for this morning's conversation, we're going to talk with some of the people who are trying to make that vision a reality for at least a few members of our community. We're going to focus our spotlight on our prevention and diversion program. It was started in 2018 by our legacy agency, Homeless Connections, as the first homelessness diversion program in Wisconsin. The goal is to intervene in situations where people are on the verge of becoming homelessness, preventing that episode of homelessness and removing the need for a shelter stay. This program has multiple impacts. It helps an individual household replace some of that stress and trauma with hope, time, and some space to breathe on their journey. It also helps relieve a bit of the pressure that's put on our shelters, which are already at capacity with long wait lists, by having fewer families just on that wait list requiring their beds. So demand for Pillars prevention and diversion programming does remain very high. During our last fiscal year, 2024, we served 142 adults and 165 children in that program with only 2 case managers. So that's why I'm very excited today to welcome Liz and Paige, who will help us dive deeper and explain this program to us. Liz Swecker joined Pillars as one of our 2 prevention and diversion case managers just a year ago in January 2024. So happy 1-year anniversary, Liz. We're glad that you're still with us. But during that time, she's already worked with over 80 households. Liz's previous professional experience working with people in similar situations, so clients experiencing homelessness, survivors of domestic violence, people in both shelter and in housing, as well as Liz's love of people and problem solving, make her an excellent fit for this program. Joining us today will be our program manager, Paige Johnson. Paige has been with us since 2017, coming to Pillars through our legacy agency housing partnership with the Fox Cities, where she was a case manager intern. During her time here with Pillars, Paige has served as a housing case manager before she assumed the newly created role of program manager back in 2022. As program manager, Paige oversees and supports the work of the prevention and diversion case managers, along with Pillars' 4 other housing programs in our outreach program. As housing case manager, Paige has worked both with individuals and families in short-term and long-term capacities to help obtain and maintain permanent housing. Through these experiences, she helps guide her team by assisting their clients in the community. So Liz, Paige, welcome. We're so glad you could join us this morning. So can you start us out by explaining how Pillars fits into our continuum of services? We got a lot of them. How does it fit in?
Thanks so much for inviting us on. We're excited to be here. So Pillars offers such a wide variety of services. We envision prevention and diversion at like the very far end. So our goal is that this would be a brief one-time experience of being at risk of homelessness. That's the goal. And then it would hopefully be people's only introduction to our continuum of care. So the continuum of care we'll talk about in later slides, but the goal would that it would be their first, only, and a brief experience of homelessness is the goal. Our goal is to keep people from needing to access further services so that they would stabilize and be ready for housing. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Paige?
No, that was great.
Cool. These are our programmed goals. So our main program goal is to avoid a shelter stay. The individuals we serve are at risk of homelessness, and so we don't want them to have to enter shelter. We want to help get them housing or get them connected to resources in the community and help them stabilize before they would need to enter shelter. So what that looks like is connecting them to the resources that they need and then helping them stabilize and ultimately self-reliance. This is a very in detail map of our Wisconsin continuum of care. So I'll go into some pieces of it, but I don't want to get like too deeply into the nitty gritty. So what this looks like is a client calls for seeking assistance. That's when they enter, it's called the Wisconsin Continuum of Care. And so that's this process that we serve homeless individuals through. And so in our state of Wisconsin, as you can see on the top left, there are a couple different areas that our state is divided into on the Wisconsin Continuum of Care. So there's the balance of state, and then there's 3 separate counties have their own continuum of care. So Dane, Racine, and Milwaukee County all operate under their own continuum of care, and the rest of us are just the balance of state. And that's partially because our community doesn't have a ton of like really large cities. There's a lot of different reasons for it. So how we operate is under the no wrong door policy. So what that means is that people can access coordinated entry regardless of where they attempt to access services, even if it's not necessarily like the right place for them to. So if someone calls us from, say they're in Oshkosh, Oshkosh is out of our service zone. It's not the county that we serve. We will still go ahead and do coordinated entry with them and then refer them to appropriate services in Oshkosh. But we will have already done that assessment so that they wouldn't have to do that again once they arrive. Coordinated entry is separated into 2 different parts. So HMIS is called the Homeless Management Information System, and then non-HMIS. So non-HMIS is confidential. None of their identifying information is placed onto that database. It's like random numbers, random letters. It's completely depersonalized so that if someone was afraid for their safety, if someone was fleeing domestic violence, if someone was just wanting a little bit more confidentiality, that's an option that they could choose instead of being placed into HMIS. HMIS is non-confidential, so it shares information like people's names, their like all that basic information. When someone enters coordinated entry, there's 2 separate lists that they can be placed on. So the first list that they can be placed on is the homeless list, and then they do an assessment called the barriers assessment. And then there are 2 separate lists, one for families with children and one for singles adults. And the outcomes of that, or interventions is what we call them, are permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, TBRA, which stands for tenant-based rental assistance. And then this is a more specific program to Pillars, but ITAP, so It Takes a Village, is a permanent supportive housing program that we run. As part of the continuum of care, we also have the prevention list. So that serves a different population than the other list. And we do a prevention assessment with them. And then the outcome is that they're placed on the prevention prioritization assessment, prevention list. And then that intervention is the prevention and diversion program. This just kind of goes through a little roadmap of what coordinated entry looks like. So access, that means it's non-discriminatory. It can be in person or by phone. And then we connect with them. We do an assessment. Then they're prioritized on the wait list, and we refer them to appropriate programs. And then a referring agency would contact them to keep up to date and make sure that they're doing okay. They don't need any other resources.
And as you can tell too, the prioritization list is an ever-changing list. So it's not something that if we're referring people or that are going through experiences of homelessness to kind of convey to them that it doesn't mean that if they get on today that they're going to get a call back tomorrow. It could be, it's based on the need. So I could come in and be placed on the list as number one, but in 3 days, Liz and other members could come in and have higher barriers or higher needs, and then they would be prioritized higher than myself. So that's one thing, is it's not a first come, first serve list. It is based off of needs.
Yeah. This goes through the populations of people that we serve through our prevention program. So the people that we serve are people who are in jail or a treatment center for more than 90 days. Someone who's going to lose their housing in the next 14 days. So that could be an eviction, a non-renewal, things like that. And then people who are doubled up. So people who are staying with friends or family, they're couch surfing, and then people who are self-paying at a hotel or motel. The populations of people that we can't serve are people who are in a place not meant for human habitation. So that means a car, outside, things like that, a storage unit. And then people who are in shelter, in an institution for less than 7 days, or in jail for less than 90 days. So there are other programs that serve this population. So you can refer to these people. So like Liz Crowley's on this call, you can refer people to her. She has a partner, Cheryl, at the City of Appleton. You can refer people to her. We have also outreach case managers, Ben and Kristen, who work with this population as well. This just goes into a little bit more detail. The population that isn't listed on the other side is individuals that are attempting to flee DV. So if they're fleeing DV and they match the previous living situation. So if they're fleeing DV and they're doubled up, they're staying with friends and family. If they're fleeing DV and they're staying in a motel, yes, domestic violence is what DV stands for. Sorry, domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. We serve that population as well, but they have to match the living situation for the populations of the prevention list. So what this looks like is people at risk of homelessness. So they have to have an annual income of below 30% of the CMI. That just stands for the county median income. They don't have sufficient resources or support networks and have one of the below. So they have to have moved more than twice in 60 days or living in the home of another, has a 21-day notice, a 5-day notice. Yeah. This is a pre-screen form. So when someone first calls us and we're assessing their needs, this is the tool that we use. Since there are a lot of community members on this call, I would guess that you haven't seen this a ton of times. So what we go through is asking if you're a survivor, and then we ask things like their name, what's their best contact information, where they're currently staying, and then we ask if they need to leave within the next 14 days. Typically, we word it as, are you able to remain in your living situation for the next 2 weeks? And then if they say yes or no to that, we would go through the next 4 questions. So have you found a new place to live? Do you have resources to help you find a new place to live? Have you had a lease? Have you moved? And then we talk about their experiences of literal homelessness. And then we go through the months of literal homelessness, their veteran status, any disabling conditions, We don't ask which disabling conditions they have, just if they have those disabling conditions. And I think that's an important caveat. All of this is self-disclosed. If at any point in time they don't want to answer any of these questions, they can skip any of these questions. It's totally up to them. We also try and be as trauma informed as possible. We want to make sure that people are sharing information that they want to share. It's not forced for them to receive services. Then the next part of this is a prevention assessment. For the prevention assessment, we ask questions like, have you been impacted by racial or ethnic bias? Have you been discriminated against due to gender identity or sexual orientation? Do you experience any barriers to housing? Do you experience any barriers to employment? Do you have a disabling condition? Has your rent increased? Have you had a loss of income? Has your household size changed? So this prevention screening just changed within the past 6 months, maybe. And so when we were putting this together, we got to be part of the committee, which was really cool, of helping choose what questions, which would, based on the answers to these questions, determines where they prioritize on that list. And so these are some questions that go through and kind of get at the root of those barriers to housing that people would experience. So what this looks like is someone calls us seeking assistance, like, hey, I have a non-renewal. Hey, my lease is ending and I don't have another place to go. So we connect with them, we refer them to other community resources as needed, and then we would do this assessment with them. And then they would be placed on the prevention and diversion wait list. Then once the client would reach the top of the list, we would attempt to contact them. We either get a hold of them or they're removed from the list. We have to make 3 attempts at least 24 hours apart. Typically, we give them a lot more time than that too. We're calling them twice a week, trying to get a hold of them. And sometimes people's phone numbers change. Sometimes people no longer have access or aren't needing services. There are a lot of different reasons why we can't get a hold of someone. And they can always be placed back on the list as well. Once we get a hold of them, we'd set up our initial meeting. And then from there, our housing search and placement begins, or the eviction prevention. So that's what our case management looks like.
So Liz, would you say, sorry, question just popped up, so I'm going to ask you mid-presentation.
Yeah, sorry,
Would
I
you
can't see
say
the
that
chat while I'm talking.
if you know somebody is on the list and their contact information changes, that contacting you to update that would be a high priority thing so they can get services when they're pulled?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely a high piece of advice to give. All right, I'll change the slide now.
So this goes through our 2 separate programs. So our prevention program and our diversion program are separately funded, and then they have different reasons that we would use them. So our prevention funding is through ESG or HPP, which is federal funding. Their income has to be below or at 30% of the county median income. The amount we can spend varies. We can use things like back rent, back utilities. We can pay for a security deposit, first and last month's rent, and then we can provide between 1 and 6 months of rental assistance. We help with application fees, mediation, legal services, moving costs, things like that. Our diversion program is funded by United Way. It's also funded by private donors that we're really thankful to have on our team, and they're excited about the work that we do. What that means is that any income level that's above that 30% would have you fall into the diversion program. We can spend anything between like 500 to 1,000 or 1,500, and then we can help with things like application fees towards the first month rent, and then a security deposit. This goes through a chart of what this looks like. Even though it's fiscal year 2025 now, the government last year came out with this in July. So we use the previous years until that changes. I just think it's really interesting to look at where people would fall on that chart based on their income. and the level of need that they would be experiencing. So for a one-person household, making under $21,850 would have you fall into prevention. And if you make anything over that, if you make 26,000, then you're into the next bucket, and then you would fall into the very low income, and you fall into the diversion program. I think it's just really eye-opening to have people see what that looks like. And so up at the top, it goes through the number of members in your household, and that's what the categories are for. Homeless prevention is for people who have a non-renewal or an eviction. We also help individuals who are needing a new place to live after being doubled up. We also like to say that we are not an eviction prevention program, but a homeless prevention program. And so that difference is that there are some programs that solely help with evictions. Someone has an eviction, they pay the back rent or back utilities that are owed, they maintain that unit. Because of how our program is set up, and because there aren't very many community resources for individuals who are doubled up, so staying with friends or family, we kind of expanded our program to include a little bit larger of a population. What this looks like is that right now with landlords, often if we're paying back rent and back utilities, the landlord is still often saying no, that they can't remain. Unfortunately, it is up to the landlord discretion on if they're able to remain in that unit or not, if they're caught up on rent or utilities. We do landlord mediation, like we're talking with that landlord. But at this point in time, the housing market is so crazy that a lot of landlords feel like they can get another tenant in there pretty quickly. And so often that they're the person who is living there that we will pay back rent or back utilities for, they still have to find a new place to live. And so what that looks like is housing search and placement. I would say a large majority, I wish I had the stats. I'm sure our wonderful data manager, Shannon, would, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But a large majority of our clients are in that housing search and placement, and they are people who are staying in hotels paid for by themselves or friends and family. That's a large majority of our clients. This goes through where we start. So we build a plan, like every other program. Our step one is building a plan. So what goals do they want to accomplish? What barriers are in the way of doing that? And then what are the next steps to get there? This is just like a sample page of what a service plan looks like. We look at categories like housing, documentation, income and benefits. Do they want to improve their education? Do they want to become employed, or do they need some job training? Is there any health issues? Do they need connections to health services? Do they have any legal issues? What are the barriers to transportation? Do they have any safety issues? And then just other. So what this looks like is identifying the barrier in the way of helping them move forward. So say someone's barrier is they lack proper documentation. So the goal would be obtain proper documentation. And the action steps to that, we try and break down as small as possible, where our goal is to make things feel manageable, accomplishable. We want to get some momentum for achieving the goals that we're setting and helping people shift their mindset from hopelessness, to some hope that we can move forward. Some of those action steps would be like ordering a birth certificate or getting a copy of something that says you have an address on it so that you can obtain your ID. And then we go through who's responsible. So some of the steps, like as a case manager, like I've got to do, that's on me. And then some of the people have other things that they need to accomplish themselves. So if they need to bring me a copy of their pay stubs, like that would be an example of something that they would be responsible for. And then we keep track of what they accomplish. So it's super exciting to help point out to people when they're struggling, like, hey, we did this, you accomplished this, and can always come back to that. This goes through some housing options in our community. Often we're pointing people towards low income housing or income based housing. So we work with the housing authorities in our area, some of those outlier cities, housing authorities, especially if the client has transportation and they're not like set on living in Appleton. We work with New London, Brilliant, Chilton, Shawano, um, Section 42 landlords. We work with a lot of private landlords. Um, we always love to say, if you know anyone who has property who would love to be a partner with Pillars, we would love to meet them, and I will happily talk with them about our program. Um, we're in the biggest need of private landlords in our community. We have mainstream landlords, but unfortunately, a majority of their screening processes really screens out the clients and the people that we serve. So they're looking for people who have an amazing credit score, who have never had any debt, who have never had any criminal history. And unfortunately, that screens out a lot of people. And so when we get to private landlords, they have a lot more personal choice on who they're renting to and can give people a second chance. Some of the creative solutions that we look at are COTS, which is transitional housing, Vita. They have the Trinity House now, which is a home for single mothers and their children. And then there are just a lot of different options. So things that we do to help stabilize people is pulling a credit report. A lot of people don't even know what's on their credit report. I would guess there are people on this call who don't know what's on their credit report. So we do that a lot with clients. We connect them to eligible benefits. Lots of people aren't accessing their food share or their state health insurance. And so we're getting them connected to those things. We help with immigration resources. To be very clear, I am not an immigration expert. We have partnered with individuals who need that support, and I have learned an incredible amount of it. However, I'm not, disclaimer, I'm not an immigration lawyer. I do not know everything, but we will certainly connect them to the resources that we know of. We help pay that security deposit first and last month's rent, and then the program is 90 days, and then they would recertify saying that they need another 30 days of assistance, and then it would be another 90 days that they'd be eligible for programming. So a total of 6 months of services are provided.
Hey, Liz.
Yeah.
Lisa Strandberg here. What is Section 42 housing? What's an example of Section 42 housing here in the Fox Cities?
Yeah, so like Old Pulley Lane is what I can think of off the top of my head. Section 42 housing means that the landlord or whoever built it got a cut from the government to make a couple of units in there that are at fair market rent or at an affordable rate. So sometimes it'll be like a 3-bedroom that's like $600 or a 2-bedroom that's like $500. Like they can lower the prices because they got a cut from the government. Yeah, typically they're not based on income. They're a set price if they're a Section 42. It's also called like a LIHTC program is what some people call it, LITC. These are some of the mainstream resources that we connect people to. So Levin, St. Vincent de Paul, Fisk, mental health services. We work with ADRC a lot, work with Forward Services and the housing authorities. There are a lot of benefits to our community and benefits to our participants to having a program like this. Ultimately, it's less expensive. It's less expensive to rehouse someone than it is for them to enter shelter. It's less traumatic. Getting someone housing improves their quality of life. It reduces shelter wait lists in the community, and we want to conserve those shelter resources. So that's kind of the benefits to why we do what we do. We love to talk through what happens afterwards. So a client finds housing and we've been moving towards these goals. What do we do now? So we set some more goals for them to continue their forward progress. For a lot of people, finding housing is just the beginning. to stabilizing their credit, to finding reliable transportation, or maybe they want to go back to school and get some more job training or education, or they want to get some fines paid off that they owe for charges. There's always something more to look for. And so helping people continue to dream and move forward is a big part of our program. We also want to look at what they need to be successful long term. And we also want to talk through what's going to be different this time. If someone has housing, if someone had housing in the past, what are you going to do differently to be or do something so that the same thing doesn't happen? You know, your last housing ended in an eviction. What are we going to do this time so that doesn't happen? And just having those really honest conversations. People appreciate honesty, and that can be a big eye opener to people of like, oh, like there are things that I need to do differently this time around.
All right. Any last thoughts, Liz, before we jump into questions?
I don't think so.
All right. So the first question we got, and this is actually one that I had as well. Jenny asked that, you know, I mentioned in the introduction that it was the first homelessness prevention program that was established in Wisconsin. Do we have any other similar programs around us now?
Not that I know of. There are very few prevention programs. I think some of the CAP services have them. That's the only ones I know of.
Yeah, I would say to the level and the extent of the prevention diversion program, not as much, but some of the eviction prevention, yeah, I mean that would probably align along with like Levin. Any agency that
Yeah.
it supports financially to keep someone sustaining their current unit would fall along with that. But to the case management, to all of the many facets that come with keeping it and having somebody stabilized, yeah, I would say that our program's unique in that way.
Yeah.
All right. And the next question we got in the chat is Kathy asked if Pillars got any federal funding that is now in danger. So yes, I know I can say that yes, I know we get federal funding. But in my role, I don't know where all the pots are. So I don't know if Paige or Lisa, if you guys want to address that.
Paige, you mind if I tackle it?
Please do.
You go for it, Lisa.
We do receive federal funding. I think often people are surprised by how little federal funding we receive relative to other sources of revenue. It's about 14% of our annual revenue. The prevention program, there is a government funding source for that, and it's an interesting source of funding. It's federal with state funds wrapped into it, so prevention is funded with state funding. We fortunately had some really amazing acts of generosity happen last year that have stabilized the organization such that we are optimistic and confident that through this tumultuous and uncertain time, we're in a good spot. So appreciate the question.
All right. So another thing that we just got, and this is another one that we hear a lot. Many of the people on our call work with families who might be at risk of losing their housing. What can they do? What's the best first step? How can they access these resources?
Yeah. So the best number one step is find out which agency is going to be in your area. So like Pillars, we serve Outagamie County, Calumet County, and Northern Winnebago. So like Neenah Menasha. If someone's in Brown County, there are other agencies that can serve them. If they are in like down in Oshkosh, there are other agencies that would serve them. So that's kind of step one. Step two, give us a call. They'll connect you to a prevention and diversion case manager. That's me. Hopefully there'll be another one of me here shortly, and I would be very excited about that. So what they would do is connect you to me, and then I would do a short screening with them that we showed on the slides. The other people that you can access are going to be Liz Crowley and Cheryl. That's going to be another point of access. There are a lot of different agencies that participate in coordinated entry. So AdvoCap, NewCap, Salvation Army. Those are just a few I can think of off the top of my head.
Mhm.
So you can point them in any direction. That's part of this open door policy, that wherever they're seeking services, that someone will point them in the right direction.
All right.
Yeah.
And I see in the question that they also ask for those contact numbers. Rather than putting them in the chat right now, we will make sure that we send a follow-up email that has that contact information so that you guys have it in writing in a more permanent sense than a Zoom chat. So I will make sure that that is added to our follow-up email of how to get in contact with Service Exist. But again, if you're in our area, calling pillars, we have that one main number, and just talking and saying, this is what I'm looking for, and we can get you transferred to the right place. So knowing our extensions is not necessary. Just call and explain, and we'll transfer you.
Yes.
All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I do have a couple questions myself, unless somebody else on the call wants to ask something, unmute and ask. All right, then I'm going to take over. So one of the things that I was wondering about with this is, how do you define success? How do you determine if someone has been successful within your program? I know that's something that as case managers, we see so many things that clients need to do. So what would be success for someone that is in your program?
Yeah. I think it's really important to look at what the small wins are. So when we look at all this different areas of a person, like if we're seeing people holistically, we're thinking of people physically, like their physical health, we're thinking of their mental emotional health, we're thinking of their social health, like how are they connected to the community, how are they connected to other people, we're thinking of their access to transportation, their access to their basic needs, so like food, shelter, a place to stay. Like when we go through all those different areas of need, success, I think, looks like connecting them to whatever's missing. So if someone needs mental health services, we're helping them get connected to wherever they want to get connected to. Or sometimes the barrier is transportation. So we're helping them find reliable transportation. We're teaching them the bus system, because that's what a lot of people use in our community. We're talking through what their other needs are that they're needing connected to. And so I think success can look like a lot of different things. It looks like them moving from where they are to where they want to be in little baby steps. When someone gets an ID, like that's a big win around here. Like you had all the proper documents to get your ID. That's amazing. Like that means you can vote. Like there are big implications for having identification. I think my favorite success that I was able to achieve in while working here was getting someone who didn't have employment, was staying with friends and family. We were able to help her find employment, and she works there full time. She loves it, and she has been able to maintain her housing all on her own for, I think we got her housing in April, and she's been good to go. We check in with her and touch base, but through being able to connect her to employment services and connecting with a private landlord who was willing to take a chance on someone who didn't have a very big rental history, she's been able to remain there. And I touch base with the landlord to make sure that things are good, and I touch base with her, and they're thriving. And that has been such a big success of connecting someone to employment who's been able to remain stably housed. Yeah.
And I think that answer right there just goes to show what so many of our case managers are dealing with on a daily basis, where you have to define success in those small baby steps, so that you are constantly seeing that progress. And eventually they add up to some stability. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right. Um, are there any trends that you're seeing when you're looking at the families coming through your program? That any community trends that you can see reflected in your work?
Yeah. One of the biggest community trends that I've seen is people really lacking that income. So they're either not employed or their income is so low that it's like barely minimum wage. And it's just really hard to get ahead when you're working a minimum wage job. And so when someone enters our program with no income, it's the start is to help look at getting them income in some way or another for them to be sustainable. Um, that's one of the biggest trends we've seen is that people either don't have jobs or are struggling to find a job that's a good fit for them that will hire them. The other trend I would say is kind of that older population of individuals. So we're talking people who are over 50, over 55, over 60. We have seen a large increase in the community of that older population that have lost housing or have instability in their housing in one way or another. And family is not there to support them. They don't have connections to resources. And honestly, a big part of it too is like the lack of understanding of technology, which is so normal, to be very clear. That's so normal. However, if you don't use your email, if you don't have an email address, if you get Social Security and you don't have an online portal for your My Social Security, like it has some barriers in place for you achieving and like accessing housing if you don't know how to do some of those things. Is there anything
I'm
you'd like
just
to add,
pulling out
Paige?
the statistic cheat sheet I have right here, and it hasn't been updated in a while. So Shannon, if you're on the call and this isn't 100% accurate anymore, I apologize, but I would love new numbers. Um, from 2020 to 2023, the percentage of clients 62 plus in our crisis housing program, so not this program, I don't have stats for you guys, jumped 143%. So that's not something we're just seeing in your program, but seeing kind of across the board. Um, it is one of our larger growth areas.
Yeah.
Stephanie,
And
do you mind if I offer an anecdote? Just yesterday, I was at our resource center and was talking to the manager there, Lauren Moan, and she said that, like, along with this, more homelessness among folks who are older. We're seeing more homelessness among folks who are barely self-sufficient in terms of their physical needs, which, is beyond the scope of service that we can provide. So that goes hand in hand with this trend that Liz described and that you added to.
Yeah, and there's, the landlord requirements have changed too, where, when I first started renting, it was, 1.5 to 2 times the rent, and now it's jumping up to 3. Credit scores like Liz had talked about, and even in the slide where the CMI was shown, you can see how low those numbers are. But it's not even people necessarily maybe being able to pay month to month and qualifying, but even just that initial jumpstart to get the security deposit in first and last month's rent. I mean, that's a big ask for so many of us, whether it's those that we're working with directly or even just members of our community, to have thousands of dollars just to transition to another place is a lot. So that's a trend. And then with our aging population, some of them are just getting outpriced. So, they may have been able to afford their apartments or their houses for years and years, and now the rents just jumped up so much that they can no longer afford it. So we're seeing, more first-time homeless and trying to navigate that with them as well. And thankfully, we have a very strong team that is there, and we don't, stop. And even when people are successfully transitioned to their own places, still looking out for them afterwards and knowing that Pillars still has your back. And, we're always just one phone call away if you need assistance and just guidance.
Yeah, I think along with that, we've seen a lot of people who are having to leave because their landlord is like updating their unit. So we've seen a lot of people having a non-renewal, and then their landlord is coming in and like they're remodeling the unit. And so while they're remodeling, they're asking everyone to leave in the meantime. And then that same unit is going to be several $100s more. And so we have seen that more and more. And then large property management companies coming in and purchasing a lot more smaller properties. So duplexes or homes that they have split into 2 levels, or like there are a lot more homes, I would say, that are owned by property management companies than you would expect, that are renting them. And that is also I would say, a barrier to people in our community, as larger rental facilities a lot of times have higher standards for people that they'll rent to. And so it disqualifies a lot of the people we serve.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, and we did get one in the chat. Sandra asked, can you help people with communicable diseases? I realize that you're not a medical supplier, but wonder for future reference if you can assist them in getting back into the community after losing everything from this type of diagnosis. So yes, you're right. We definitely do not diagnose or treat anybody. But what do we do when someone comes with us with a physical health challenge, like a communicable disease that has been the barrier that's likely caused a lot of their housing instability?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of getting them connected to housing providers. It's also a matter of getting them connected to healthcare providers. One of our partners in the community is Vivint, and so they have a specific population of individuals that they serve who are people experiencing HIV or AIDS. I've had wonderful experiences working with them, and they are absolutely fabulous. They also receive funding, so they're able to help with a lot of different things. So they're our community partner too, who serves a specific population as well. Yeah. Anything you'd like to add?
No, that's about, yeah, because when it comes to our services, there's no barriers. We definitely follow the housing first practice and model. So, coordinated entry, there's not anything like that that would ever be a deterrent from someone being able to access our services.
Yeah.
All right. Paige, you just said the housing first model. Can you tell us in a sentence or two what that is?
I would love to. No, so essentially that is just saying that there isn't a barrier to access our services. There's not an income requirement, there's not a credit score, criminal background checks, anything like that. It is literally assessing the person and saying, we recognize that there are challenges, how can we help? What are those? We're not looking at those challenges as negatives. We're looking at it as access points to get them connected to it. So when we do that, yeah, it's definitely, no, like Liz said, no wrong door. We are just here to help.
So we focus on, what can we do to get you housed first before like necessarily working through all their tangled issues?
It all kind of comes hand in hand, oddly enough, because sometimes it's hard to focus on those smaller steps when you don't know where you're going to be going or staying the night, the next night. But those are still essential steps into obtaining that housing. So it's this really beautiful dance that we kind of have to do as a team to work with our clients in the communities to make sure that those supports are needed and are met. So yeah, it all goes hand in hand. We need to kind of work in tangent to get everything to align.
So
Yeah,
basically, we understand it's complicated.
Yeah, I've learned that now as an adult for the last 2 decades. Yeah, it's very complicated.
All right. So if you're ever working with anyone that says I'm too complicated, we can still help them. Lisa?
I just want to layer one sentence on top of that. Like, the evidence base suggests that it's a lot easier to overcome substance use issues, mental health issues, physical health issues if you have a place to sleep at night.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
That's housing
from what I've
first.
read, it actually financially makes sense too. So,
Yes.
All right, we are to the end of our time, so I'm going to wrap us up real quick. We do have a few events coming up just to mark your calendars. Again, our next Conversations Over Coffee is going to be April 24th. The Help for the Homeless drive will happen before that. That's not our drive, but we are one of the beneficiaries of that drive. It's run by the family radio station, and it's going on for 20, I don't even know how many years, maybe 27. A lot of years in our community. So many of you are probably familiar with that. However, we do really appreciate that drive in terms of getting some of the products to help our clients on the shelf, basic hygiene products and cleaning products. Um, there's over 400 boxes that have been requested in our community. So your workplace may be one of those drop-off sites if Grisso uses them. Two really easy ones to mention are Festival Foods and Walgreens. Those chains will be having boxes if you want to drop items off there as well. And then we are having our report to the community this year. It will be on Thursday, April 3rd, same time frame as New Year's from 7:30 till about 9:15, 9:30 a.m. So come join us. It'll be at the core in downtown App, and watch for registration. That'll be opening up in mid-February. So coming up here in a couple of weeks. We'd love to have you join us and hear more about what Pillars has been doing in the past year and what we hope to do in the next year. As always, connect with us, stay active and engaged. You can use our website or a variety of social platforms that are all listed here and linked through our website. We'd love to have you connect and be a part of the conversation in our digital realm. And thank you all for joining us. It's exactly 8:30, so I'm going to end this call. But thank you for being here and being a part of our discussion.